and welcome to Hedgehog Hollow and welcome to my feature here, HNDMD. Today we're going to be using our chameleon pencils to make a no-line coloured image. The image I've chosen is their new sunflower, which is from their August release. It's absolutely beautiful and perfect for your note cards. Now you could create one of these note cards, you could maybe create 6 as a set, or just to keep in your drawer for those just in case moments when you want to pop a card in with a gift, or maybe someone just needs a little pick-me-up. There's lots of different sentiments in the set as well, everything from have a great day through to with deepest sympathy, so you can really use it for any occasion. I'm also going to show you how to create this textured centre that looks like sunflower seeds in the middle, and we're going to be using Nuvo drops for that. Don't forget to check out the blog. The link is below the video with all your supply lists as well. The blog will have extra information, a image version of your supply lists, as well as some more pictures of the card as well. So let's get started.
So here we have today's card, and you can have a little bit of a close-up there at the centre. I've also got this really fun picture that Greg took of it, and you can see how it looks like sunflower seeds, that crackle, and how on fire it is. So let's get started with actually making our card. I'm going to use a half 8.5 by 11 Nina Desert Storm, and I'm going to cut that in half to give us 2 notelets. So out of one piece of 8.5 by 11, you will get 4. I'm cutting this one at 5.5. I will of course link everything, including the paper cutter, in the description below the video and in the blog post, so check those out as well. Do visit the HNDMD blog because their August release is absolutely beautiful. And speaking of which, we're going to be using one of the new releases. I also wanted to mention that this is the Tonic Tim Holtz platform, and on your screen top right, hopefully right now, there is how to use the foam and the Teflon mat and things. So this is our gorgeous sunflower from Everyday Sentiments, and I'm positioning it so that the stem is completely on the card, and so you kind of have that just under a half off the edge of the fold. Now on the original one I used tea dye. That will give you a darker effect, and for this one I used antique linen, just so you can see a couple of different options that you have available to you. So these are just the regular distress inks, and I can stamp that down to get my lovely image there. You can see how pretty that is, and while we're here we're going to add a sentiment, but because I have the Teflon mat I just can wipe straight off any of that overstamp and use my stamp chamois to also clean the stamp while we're here. Now this set has some great things. It has birthdays, love yous, just for yous, sympathy, and feel better soon. Lots of different sentiment options, and I'm going to go with the just for you for this one because I want to make a set to give to some teachers. I like to bundle them up with some ribbon, and then they can send those home to parents or with kids who do a good job. I'm using the My Favourite Things hybrid black to stamp out my sentiment, and it looks nice and clear on that crafty coloured cardstock. Now we're ready to add some colour to our image, and I'm going to be using my chameleon pencils. I love these. You've seen me use these before. Along the bottom you get that nice grid, but what colour is on each pencil. Each pencil has a dark and a light end. If you use the light end very lightly you'll get super pale, and then it goes all the way through to pressing hard with that dark end, and that gives you some different colours in there. Now for greens I'm going to be using pencils 20, 21 and 19, a bit back to front order there. And what I do, tips I was given when I started with Copics was to colour underneath in yellow. So I used the lemon peel on pencil 2 for that first of all, and it does really work. And then I'm just working from dark to light through all the shades of those greens, all over the leaf and the stem. So you can keep working, and then you want to work on to those darker edges that you've used with the stamp, and for that I'm using one of my darker shades. I'm using Shamrock for that, and Summer Leaf for those really dark ones, and they will cover up those light stamping lines. I also then go back in with the pear and add just a highlight around the edge. Really makes it pop on those neutral cardstocks. You can also try this technique on some light blues, some light pinks, greys, all those kinds of things as well. Now we want to get some flawless blending, so we're going to add some Gamsol or mineral spirits, and again everything's linked there for you, and I just use a paper stump that I dip straight into the bottle. Bit of a cheats way of doing it, but it works really well. You can see how flawless and textured that looks. It will appear dark straight away. Give it a second to evaporate before you add any more colour. You just want to make sure you've got some true colours first of all. Now we're going to go in with our yellows. So I am using pencil number 2 and pencil number 3. And again, I'm going to colour all over just very lightly with the yellow, so that anything that I don't add extra depth and shadows on, it will just shine through with that light yellow, fun sunflower colour. And I really do like these pencils. I bought these. I do have Prisma pencils as well, but I do tend to use these far more than the Prismas. So I first of all went round and I added just a touch of that really dark, vibrant orange kumquat, it's called, in the centre of the flowers. And then I used the lighter end of that pencil called Papaya, and I added shading in the tops, just kind of mirrored the shading that was already in the stamp. And I also went around the edge of the petals, just into sort of the veins of the petals, adding some bits and pieces of texture. And I do find that this is kind of a layered process. I'm not a patient colourer by any means, but this is definitely the way to go. I then used grapefruit to add in all of the other petal details. So I edged every single petal. I went round just adding in anything that I hadn't covered with those two darker shades. I would suggest working in stages exactly as I've done here, and then you can see how vibrant you want your image to be. As I say, with the first one that you see later on in the picture sample, I also used pencil number 4, Ginger and Spice, to add some really dark details, because you'll find sunflowers, some are bright yellow, others are more on the brown side. You can play around and get all sorts of different fun colours. We're now going to go back in with our Gamsol again, and I scribbled off some of the excess green that might still be on our tool there just onto some scrap paper. You could also use the sanding blocks that come with them as well. So I worked firstly from the centre of the flower out with those darker areas, and then I worked from the tip in, just blending, making sure that I gave all those areas a second to evaporate as well. So I worked in a clockwise motion, and then I went back to the top and had a look at what I wanted to add. I then went back in with my darker shade and added some more edges in. I really wanted to make it pop against that neutral background. So again, you can see me doing the same thing, going in with the Gamsol until I am happy with all of that lovely shading. You can of course use the same techniques with your Prisma pencils with the Gamsol as well. You can also use the Gamsol with your Spectrum Noir pencils if you have those, but I do like these chameleons. They're great value for money. You get double-ended and they do give you perfect blends. So if you don't want to have to buy hundreds of pencils that are going to blend together perfectly, then definitely go with these, and check out the link below for some shopping options. So again, just going back in with that Gamsol, and I decided to go into a more orangey flower this time. You could also make this into a daisy, I think, if you worked with it with whites and light greens. Now I'm going in with my brown, my sugar, spice and ginger, and I want to do this in case anywhere where the Nuvo drops crack. You'll see in a second if there's any cardstock showing. I want to make sure that it's covered with some colour. This is the Copper Penny Nuvo Crystal Drops, and the technique I use is a bit like icing a cake, is just dot and flick, dot and flick. You'll find because of the heavy body of the Nuvo drops, that flick then kind of goes down and that gives you that mottled effect. We're also going to accentuate that mottled effect in a second. You want to go all over, just dot, 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 and you'll see that lovely texture already starting to appear. I'm then going to use my Ranger Heat It tool. Gives you the same heat as an embossing tool, but not as vigorous. And I'm going to let it bubble up. I'm actually just going to do a short version on this. You probably want to do 1 to 2 minutes. I did about 45 seconds here. The longer you go, the more of a bubbly and crackled effect you get. And I will pop all of these pictures that we took and things on the blog post too. So there you can see that it started to set. One thing I will say is that right now it will look like it's set, but it's not. It is just a skin on there. You want to give it a good 10 to 15 minutes to make sure it really sets hard for you. So here are some pictures that we took, and as I say, they'll all be in the blog post. Feel free to pin them and save them. There's also some other recommended videos that I did for H&D MD on the screen, plus of course those all important subscribe buttons. So give us a thumbs up, leave us some crafty love, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you again soon. Happy stamping. Bye.